Hello once again, it's Mr. Pete, your YouTube shop teacher. Welcome back. And this is tips number 724, and it's all about assembling this beautiful little RETROL double acting steam engine along with the little generator dynamo that came with it. So I hope you watched the previous video, number 723, where I more or less unboxed and introduced this particular engine here. And I've received several engines from this company over the years. There's other videos of them as well. And they are so well built and so awesome. Let me flash on the screen right now number 723, so you can go back and watch that if you have not. Otherwise, I'm going to get started here, and since this is rather laborious and is going to take a long time, I will be speeding it up and just showing key points of it. So let's begin. Now, if you're interested in one of these engines, this is the company RETROL, and specifically if you want to order one, it's through enginediyshop. And all of the links are in the description, and there is a 20% discount before Christmas. So check out the description below. So I'm going to take everything out of the packaging and kind of organize it on the bench so I can understand the different parts and so on. And I am following their very detailed instructions, and I won't really show much of that, but as you can see here, they really show you where the fasteners and the different parts go. So this is probably a fairly easy job for almost anyone over 14 years of age. This is not for little children. Okay, here are all the parts laid out on the table. And according to the directions, there are 100 parts. I don't know if that includes all these little fasteners, but I'm going to leave the little fasteners in their bags because I think that there are numbers on the bags, and so I know exactly where these go. Also, as I mentioned in the other video, there are a lot of sub-assemblies here that have been assembled at the factory. For instance, the engine along with the piston and the connecting rod and everything is all pre-assembled, as is the boiler and the generator. Okay, here's step one. The engine itself will be fastened on to the stainless steel base plate with 4 little cap screws here, the short ones, and those are 2.5 millimeter, and these little hex keys are provided, but I prefer to use my T-handle ones. I'll be right back after I have this fastened on. Okay, the engine is fastened onto the plate. What's next? In step 2, I'm going to fasten this whole subassembly onto the base, or the plinth, whatever you might want to call it. So it's going to go on just like that with these rather long cap screws and nuts on the bottom, but there'll be 9 of these brass spacers between the stainless steel plate and the base. Now that's going to be kind of fiddly, so I'll be back in a couple minutes. Before I go too much farther, I already have 5 of the screws in, but before I put these screws in, these 2 bearing standards will be mounted, one here and one right here, again using the same screws and spacers, and they did provide a little tweezer so you can sneak those little pieces of tubing in there. Okay, all 9 bolts are tightened, and they did include a little wrench that worked pretty well, believe it or not. Now there are 3 tiny little ball bearings. Notice that they have a bit of a flange on them. So one of them goes right into this bearing standard, and they just press in, and then one of these on each side right here where my fingers are. By the way, this beautiful assembly here of reversing gears is the Stevenson linkage. Several people have mentioned that. So I'm going to put the valve, this is the spool valve, and it's going to go into the hole right here. And, you know, as always, no matter what you assemble in life, always a couple drops of RETROL. And next, the reversing. Notice there's a threaded hole here, so it goes right into this hole right here, and this tiny screw goes in from the back side where I'm pointing. And tighten it securely. It's like a shoulder bolt, so you can't get it too tight. See, there's a little bit of play here. And then on this side, this little screw with the knurled head on it. So we can lock the lever in the position that we desire. This is going to be a little tricky, but this is really fun so far. This is the main shaft, and although it is round, it has quite a flat spot on it that goes from one end to the other. So the main shaft will go through this brass piece and through the bearings, and then through another bearing on the other side here, and the flywheel, and through the other bearing. And there are 3 tiny little set screws that I have mounted, not mounted, held on a magnet so I don't lose them. And the smallest wrench that they gave is what you will use to tighten those. I missed one step, so I took this little screw back out, and this part has to have the screw go through it, and it in turn fastens into that other little brass piece. Alright, that's more like it. The main shaft has to go in from this end, right through the flywheel, and then through the eccentric, and then it comes through and goes in to this part. And now, using the smallest Allen key, we have to tighten all 3 set screws. There's one on the flywheel, there's one here, and there's one here, and they all have to be tightened up against the flat on the main shaft. And if you don't do that, you will not have the correct timing and it will not run. So be very careful on that step. Now that all of the screws are tight, make sure that the engine turns over freely. There should be no tight spots. If there is, there's probably some adjustments that can be made in regards to loosening up screws and repositioning it a little bit, but it will not run if there's any bind. And one final thing here is the very last set screw was put into this tiny little brass sheave with 2 grooves, and it'll go on just like that, and the set screw also will tighten up against the flat. I'm on step 8 now, and the brass base for the lamp will go right here using these 2 little screws and nuts. And the electrical junction box will fasten underneath like this with these 2 long screws holding it down, and nuts. Now don't lose any of these little screws or parts because they're all metric and you will never find them at your local store. And that's what the junction box looks like from the bottom side. And the next step, and we're on step 9 now, if you're interested, we take the little generator dynamo, and it's going to go on these 4 screws here like that, but I will feed the wires, the heavy-duty wires, through that hole. No grommet, I hope we don't have a fire, and just like that. Those are slotted holes in the generator, and this little pile of screws here and nuts will fasten it down. It seems a little early to do this, but I'm going to take the belt and put it on the large pulley here and the small pulley on the generator, and we might possibly have to switch it later on. And then the switch for the lamp goes in this hole right by a RETROL. So stick that through there like that. It's a union job, you know. And then from the bottom side, off camera, I will put the little nut and washer to hold the switch in place. Time to put the lamp on, so the 2 wires have to be threaded down through the lamppost standard, and then the wires again down through the base, and there is That's just a press fit, apparently. Do you know what these two little bars are? Yes, it was so the lamplighter could lean his ladder against the post. And it will be a real simple wiring job. One red wire right here on the orange, it should be red, and well, one on each side on the red. Yellows, there's two of them, one on each side, and finally blues, one on each side. That's what it looks like from the bottom, so route your wire so they look kind of nice, and I've kind of doubled them over there. They really need to be fastened some way, but I think this will work. But I do love this junction block. Made it very easy, and the wires were pre-stripped. I am now assembling the boiler stand or furnace or whatever this is called. So we're taking these little hex brass, and they're threaded on each end. Notice the two holes there. So these screws right here, these small screws, will come up from the bottom and screw through this and into the brass. I'll be right back as soon as I do that. These are just beautiful stainless steel stamping. So the end piece with the hole in it goes right here. There's a little tab that goes in the slit, just like that. And on the front, this piece can go on either way, and it also has a little tab that goes into this little slit or slot. And then this side goes on there, also assembled just like this with two of these hexagon brass pieces, and it's kind of tricky. And do not tighten up any of these screws until the whole thing is pretty well together, because it's going to be a little bit fussy. Okay, the stainless steel furnace is all done and the screws are tightened from the bottom, and now I can thread the little tubing here from the boiler through this hole on the side of the furnace, something like this. See how it goes through? And then there are two straps that go around like this and are held in place with the last four little cap screws. This is the alcohol lamp or alcohol burner. So the wicks go in there like this, and this piece on top. And that's what the burner looks like. And you can use denatured alcohol, that's what I'm going to use, and either take this apart to put the alcohol in, or probably can squirt it in right through here. And then the whole burner goes in like that when you're ready to start cooking. And there is a bag of spare parts, extra gaskets, and pulleys and belts and things like that. So hang on to that. Well, it's actually several days later because of the Thanksgiving holiday, but during that time I've been running this and playing with it, and you'll see some discoloration on it here because of that. But in an earlier clip in the video, you may have noticed that I had this silicone tubing connected incorrectly. So it actually goes into this little tube right here. I think I had it down here. And I never did try to run that way. I did catch it later on. So, and I shortened it up. You don't want a 6-inch piece there, so I cut it off. And the extra piece I put here on the exhaust, because there will be steam and water coming out of there, and it's nice to have some way to catch it. You don't have to, that's optional. I may not have mentioned this before, but there's a little knurled screw here. Take that out and put several drops of oil in here. That's the oiler. And I don't know how, there's a wick in there. I don't know how often you have to do that, but I did notice oil coming out in the water because it'll turn it kind of milky, won't it? So snug that down. There is a gasket on it. So after you fill the lubricator here with your little oil bottle, put a little oil on the two shafts. You don't need much. And on any moving part here, particularly the the three little eccentrics. Just a drop of oil. And what else I noticed is that almost immediately this little knob that goes right here came off, so I think I'm going to have to use some super glue or something to keep that in place because it looks so much better, so don't lose that. I mentioned before that you have to make absolutely sure that the engine turns freely. Well, I had a little interference, and what it seemed like here is that the piston was bottoming out in the cylinder. Not very much, but just a little bit. So to correct that, I loosened up this little nut here, and the shaft to the piston, that's the piston shaft, has a thread on it, so I readjusted it so that there was no bottoming out. And again, this is your packing gland. Don't get that too tight because it can cause resistance, but I do notice that mine drips once in a while, and that's kind of typical of steam engines. Don't worry about that. Notice that I now have it setting on a steel plate for safety, and I got to tell you this story now. I was out of denatured alcohol, and I went to Walmart, and I went to the paint department. I got a hold of a nice young man, and I said, I need some denatured alcohol, and he said, what? I repeated it 3 times. He had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. I did look through all the thinners, and paint thinner, lacquer thinner. There was nothing there, and he said, I guess we don't have it. Well, then, and that shocked me. How could you be 25 years old and not know what denatured alcohol is? But, all right, forget it. So then I went to the pharmacy department because in the instructions it says that you can use rubbing alcohol, which is isopropyl alcohol, but they said at least 95%. Well, they had some there that was 20, 50, and other. So I bought this for $3. And I did try it, and it worked, but I cannot tell you how sooty, what black soot that it produced, and that's why, and I'm so sorry I did that, don't do it. That's why I've got a mess here. Look at the soot, and I tried to get some of it off, but I guess it gives the engine character because, I rubbed it, I could not get it off, but I'm back. Then I went down to Ace Hardware, who has a complete line of everything ever made, and I purchased some denatured alcohol, which denatured means what? They poisoned drinkable alcohol. I've ranted about that many times. Now, you watched me earlier in the video with a wash bottle putting distilled water, never tap water in there until it's about half full. And if you do not, you won't have one of these, let's face it. But funnels do not work very good because it's got to be a tiny funnel, much smaller than this, and then it's going to go glug, glug, glug because you don't have a vent. So if you have an enema bulb or a syringe of some kind, use that, but don't try to just pour it in there. And I already showed you how to fill the burner. Notice how discolored it is because I have been running it, and make sure that you mark all of your bottles. You don't want to put water in there. Well, it just won't work, but make sure you don't put alcohol in your boiler. Okay, fire it up, fire it up. Put it in place. Now, there's an approximately a 5-minute wait, so I'll be back. It's been about 5 minutes, and you will see a little bubbling around the whistle. In fact, the valve on this whistle is not very good because sometimes I hear it whistling without even, not quite enough. Oh, and I did try to put a string on the handle, the valve of the whistle, but then it touches the boiler and it burns, so don't bother trying to do that. But this is pretty hot. Don't burn yourself on it. Did you hear that or not? Now make sure the valve is open, and you can use a tweezers for that or a gloved hand or whatever. And it's already open. Boy, it's hot. Be careful. See, that's how you do it. And you will see water starting to drip, but no steam yet. And then do open up your little condensation valves. Did you hear it just beep? And I'm not even touching it. Yeah, that's wasting steam, I don't see much here yet. I'll be right back. Alright, you're seeing a little water dripping, so I'm going to close these two valves. The whole engine must heat up and it's too hot to touch. See a little bit of water there? We're not going to worry about that. Now you can change the speed slightly with this, but it's also the reversing lever for the Stevenson valve. For some reason it doesn't seem to run as fast in reverse. Maybe it's not quite hot enough yet. How awesome is that? The most dangerous thing with any boiler, I'm talking about big steam engines and buildings and everything, is for a boiler to run out of water. So absolutely do not allow your boiler to run dry. In this case, it probably wouldn't explode, but it could very well damage it. And you can see why I have a little pan there, because now the water is just a little bit oily and milky because of that oiler. Well, I'm having fun here, and you know, I can have my own steam fair because I've got the other beam engine from RETROL and the beautiful little hit and miss, and you've seen videos on those. If you have not, go back and watch them. And I hope you have had fun and enjoyed this video. Remember that all the information you might need if you want one of these is down in the description below. This kind of reminds me of that song about the old lamplighter. Remember that? I think Patti Page sang that. Well, that about concludes the video. Now, if you buy one of these for a grandchild or someone young, make sure you supervise them unless they're 14 or 16 years old. I know I gave you a lot of warnings here, but you know, you can't be careful enough around fire and hot water. So I hope everybody has a happy holiday. Remember, I got 15 other videos, and thank you to RETROL for providing these engines for your viewing pleasure. So long for now.